What happened at your child's school that made your jaw drop? My youngest daughter, now fully grown, was in I believe grade 1 or 2 at the time this happened. She came home from school one day and told me that a boy had been picking on her. I asked for more information. I do not subscribe to that he pulled your hair so he just likes you crap, but I didn't want to react until I knew what was actually going on. She described a classic bully. He would slap her, kick her, push her. He often did it when the teacher wasn't aware, and she reacted in the classic I'm being bullied fashion of trying to be smaller and less noticeable to him. My advice was in stages. Stage 1 was simple. I told her not to shrink. Grow. That little jackass wants to slap you. You exploded him verbally and make certain that the teacher notices and understands that you are reacting. She did stage 1 the first few days, and she was upset because the teacher kept doing nothing about it. Stage 2 was equally simple. I taught her how to throw a proper punch, a punch that would allow her to get her power behind it with proper form to avoid breaking the bones in her hand. The school called. They explained that my daughter had caused a problem that was really serious, and we needed to come in and talk with them. Your daughter attacked one of the other students, quoth the teacher. Nope, I'm pretty sure she didn't, rebutted I, rebutfully. Jackson, can you tell us what happened? She had been drinking at the water fountain, and the kid came along and pushed her hard, face first into the porcelain. If memory serves, she had a bloody nose as a result, so she remembered what I taught her. She turned around and threw a nasty punch, and the kid ran off to tell the teacher. Striking children is not acceptable. Puff the puffy teacher. Yes, you are absolutely right. That kid has been striking my daughter for at least a few days, and I told her to bring it to your attention. You didn't do anything to protect her and safeguard your students from a bully, so she had to address the situation herself. I won't have my child be a bully, but I won't have them victimized, so I taught her how and when to strike back. And I'm not sorry. Many guffaws. Many splutters. Finally, the teacher said the thing. Mr. Martin, you have to understand that this boy is from another country, and he hasn't learned yet what is and is not acceptable. Before anyone gets all xenophobic, let me stop you right there. This wasn't a OMG foreign kid monster post. This was a for fuck's sake, teacher post. So I explained that the kid wasn't going to learn by not being held to account. It was the teacher's job to maintain the safety of all of the students, and when she didn't react to his behavior, she greenlit him to keep going. So while I get that the boy was from a place with very different social rules, those social rules wouldn't work here, so if the school wasn't going to address it, my kid would continue to stand up for herself. Honestly, I couldn't believe that anyone at this point, like 15 years ago, would be justifying bullying in an elementary school by saying that it was a cultural difference. Maybe they were working with this boy behind the scenes and I had no idea, though I strongly doubt that, but either way, my kid wasn't going to be a victim. And yeah, guess who never had a problem with the boy again?
Who is the most immature adult you've ever met? I had a roommate who had no common sense. She honestly didn't know things that children would know. It wasn't her fault. She came from a very wealthy family. They wanted her to be a tennis pro, so they sent her to private schools throughout her life. She was on my university's tennis team and she was very good. Her parents had paid for her to live in a dorm on campus her first 3 years of college. By the time she reached her senior year of college, she'd never done anything for herself in her life. She was 22. That's when I met her. I put an ad out online because the person me and my other roommate had previously lived with graduated the semester before and moved out. A girl named Hannah replied to the ad. She was cute and nice, so we let her sign a contract and move in with us. Sometimes I felt like I was raising an 8-year-old living with her. She kept not paying rent. I'd get a notice from the landlord saying a portion of the rent hadn't been paid. I'd tell my roommate she needed to pay and she'd pay immediately. This happened for 3 months in a row. Finally, I said, Hannah, I'm not your mom. I can't remind you to pay rent every month. You need to do it yourself. Her eyes got really big. She said, oh, I didn't know that rent had to be paid at a certain time every month. She used to make giant pots of soup and leave them on the stove for days, unrefrigerated. I got concerned and told her she shouldn't eat something that had been sitting out uncovered for 3 days. She was confused. I had to explain to her how she'd probably get very sick and food can go bad if it's not refrigerated properly or not eaten for too long. After that, my other friend left some soup in our fridge that she wanted to come back and pick up the next day. When I came home the next day, Hannah was eating it. I said, Hannah, why are you eating my friend's soup? She said she was going to pick it up today. Hannah replied, well, I took the soup out of the fridge and left it on the counter because I knew she was going to come pick it up. But she didn't come for a while, so I figured the soup was going bad like you told me, so I thought I'd eat it. I just replied, why didn't you just leave it in the fridge until she arrived? Hannah apparently never thought of that. Once some mice invaded our home, Hannah left her food in the cupboards uncovered, like her rice and cereal. I told her she had to box them up or the mice would get in her food and poop in it and make her sick. She tied some rubber bands around some of her food, but that was it. I had to secure all of her food for her because I worried about her, and I wanted the mice gone. Another time, we went on a hike together and saw a tent made to look like a teepee in the forest. She asked, do you think pilgrims live in there? I'm pretty sure she meant Amish people, but either way, I was dumbfounded. Up to a year after we were roommates, she would call me asking me about random bills that got charged to her that didn't relate to me at all. I couldn't believe some of the stuff she got into just because she had no common sense. The thing is, she was pretty book smart. She got good grades in her major. She was amazing at tennis, which takes intelligence. She just had zero common sense. I had never met someone like that before. I was basically her caretaker all year. She was super sweet and I liked her, but wow, did I get annoyed with her sometimes. Anyways, she's probably going to become a pro tennis player now. She'll have a coach or enough money to have other people handle her life for her, so I think she's going to turn out okay.
I, 18F, am racist, and I want to change. I have never told this story before. I've talked about it with my mother, but I've never told anyone else. I am 18. My parents were young when they had me. They are both 39. I was 8 when this happened, but I will never forget it. My parents and I were out shopping at the mall. My mom and I went potty and my dad waited. The bathroom was kinda in an alley within the mall, and it was empty when we went. When we were done, my dad said, "Actually, I gotta go too real quick." He wasn't in there long, but when he went in, another man came out. It was a black man. He looked at my mom and grinned and said something like, "Hey, honey, what are you doing?" And my mom stood in front of me and held me behind her and said, "Waiting for my husband." And he said, "He doesn't have to know." I don't remember what he said, but my mom got really nervous and kept stepping back. Her hands were holding mine to make sure I stayed behind her. Then the man went behind her, so my mom took me in front of her and bent over a little, and the man slapped her on the behind and told her, "Oh, I'll tear you up," or something gross like that. I don't remember what happened after that, but I remember we were facing the door to the bathroom and the man was behind my mother. My dad came out soon after and my mom pushed me into my dad and then ran to him and started crying, and my dad was confused, and the dude just ran out of the alley. My dad is not very intimidating. He's only about an inch taller than my mom. He's about 5 feet 8 inches. I think the guy just had much worse plans than slapping my mother on the behind, but my dad came in the middle of them. When he ran, his hat fell off. It was a plain black Raiders hat. My dad comforted my mother and asked what happened, and my mom said she wants to leave and she wants to leave now. She was still crying as she said this. My dad picked up the hat and took me and my mom home, and then went back to the mall or the police station or something. My mom was crying for hours. She was just sitting on the couch bawling until my dad came home, and then she cried in his arms. My mom to this day is never the same. She doesn't go anywhere without my dad. When we are out, she doesn't let him leave his sight. In fact, during COVID we were at Target and my mom wouldn't let him go to the bathroom alone. She made him go into the bathroom with her. It was like the family bathroom, so it's not what it sounds like. My mom is very racist. My dad calls her out on it, kinda. My parents got into a big fight once after the 2020 thing. My mom called all the victims the N-word and my dad wasn't okay with that. When I see black men, I get scared. I think about that day at the mall and what happened to my mom. I have had anxiety attacks because of being around black men. I could go on, but I know it's wrong, and I do not want to be like this anymore. I know it is wrong and I know it is not okay. I want to change.
What is your biggest regret in life? Pinging hi on Facebook to my crush during my final year of college, 2018. She was an intelligent, classy girl and I was always in awe of her during my entire college days. I never had the guts to start a conversation with her though. Somehow gathered courage and sent a hi along with congrats on the day she got a placement offer. That is how it all started. She replied and the conversation began. We would chat almost every other day on Facebook on some random topic from then on, and the chats were never ending. There were days I slept on my laptop itself while chatting. From FB we graduated to WhatsApp slowly and started becoming good friends. Friendship started showing sudden signs of possessiveness 6 months down the line. We both knew we weren't just friends anymore, but we did not accept it for a long time because of our orthodox family backgrounds which would fail to understand love. 2 years later, during some random fight, she confessed that she loves me and we can't be just friends anymore. I loved her throughout these years. It was our family backgrounds which stopped me from taking it forward. But, now with she conveying her feelings, I wiped all such thoughts and said a yes to her. We began our relationship with lots of hope and love about our futures. The relationship lived through all tough situations for 2.5 years. I started thinking of her as my wife as opposed to girlfriend, as we were so hopeful and blinded by love. I had imagined a whole life with her all these years. I convinced my family somehow and they were okay with my love, but she couldn't do that. Her parents gave emotional tortures and she went through a lot of trauma. It was a disastrous 3 months in our relationship. She tried her best. She had to choose between her parents and me. I loved her so much that I could do anything for her, anything to make her feel better. All I wanted was for her to be happy after those emotional tortures she went through. We cannot live happily knowing her parents would be unhappy, so we ended our relationship. Little did I know what this would cause to me in the upcoming months, as all I wanted at that moment was her to be relieved from the pressure her family was exerting on her. Initial days post-breakup were fine, as I spent a lot of time in office and with friends. Slowly but steadily, breakup started having its effect on me. 3 months post-breakup, I felt like visiting the places I went with her. I started going to these places often from then. I started missing her terribly. I reduced talking to people. I started spending times alone staring at the plain sky every evening. 6 months post-breakup, I somehow figured out she had been married. I was happy for her and her parents. At the same time, I understood breaking up and watching them belong to someone else are two entirely different things. I felt numbness in me. Something which belonged to you all through had suddenly been ripped off you. I fell sick, lost weight, lost hope in life, almost lost reasons to genuinely smile in the consequent months. I'm trying hard to cope up with life. I will live through for the sake of my parents. It's been 5 years since we broke up, and here I am, at 3 a.m., trying to retrospect what would have happened if I had not pinged a high 5 years back. Maybe I wouldn't have inflicted pain and emotional burden on her peaceful family. Maybe I would not be missing someone else's wife now. Maybe I would be sleeping peacefully now without worrying about anything. Yes, I truly regret pinging her that day.
My ex-fiancé refused to respect my boundaries, so I married his best friend. Back in 2019, I had just moved my long-term partner into my house due to a series of poor life choices on his end. It had been a rocky relationship for most of its duration, but I was young and dumb. I believe this was him wanting to commit and truly start our lives. By early 2020, we were engaged. I was a full-time university student, sole caretaker for my mentally disabled mother, and taking care of the house and our pets. He worked a standard 40-hour-a-week, minimum wage job and refused to help with any aspect of life. I found out on Christmas Day 2020 he had been unfaithful and had forgotten to tell me. He was planning on leaving me but had informed everyone except for me because he was failing to secure a new residence. Apparently his fuck buddy didn't like him enough to let him move in. At this point it was very little love lost and I expected he would be moving out within the coming weeks. Fast forward 3 entire months and his search for a living place was non-existent, and he was acting more and more entitled. Clearly by this point, he is an unwelcomed freeloader who has taken up residence in my living room. I was about to secure an eviction notice to get him off my couch. He began swiping Tinder with his phone volume loudly on. I told him to not do that in my presence as it was highly insensitive to do in my home and he could do it in private. This continued, so I told him I would sleep with one of his friends. It was said in a moment of anger and was more of an empty threat at the time. However, I am known for seeing goals to their completion. I messaged the guy who was supposedly my ex's best friend and the best man for the wedding. It turns out he didn't even consider my ex a close friend and my ex had acted similarly terrible to this guy previously as well. We bonded over our terrible experience, hit it off really well in general, and started dating. I was upfront about what the catalyst for me to reach out to him was. After 2 years of dating we were married April 2nd. He watched me graduate with that bachelor's degree my ex disliked. I'm halfway through my master's, and my husband works in a specialized steady field that supports us. Last I heard my ex got kicked out of his dad's house, never was able to officially date his side chick, and has not made any choices to better his life. My mom is a victim of a romance scam, and she is in denial. My mom is 73 years old. She has been talking to a guy she met on Tinder since July last year. He says he's 48 years old, that he has a fat bank account, and that he is a U.S. citizen but was working in Turkey for USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. He said he was coming back to the U.S. to meet her, but he lost his wallet, so his bank account is locked until he comes back to the U.S. He initially asked her for $1,000, which she sent to him through Cash App. Then he said that he was attacked and had his finger cut off, and then the hospital wouldn't release him until he paid his bill, as if a hospital could hold you prisoner until you paid. She sent him more money. Every time he says he's coming back to the U.S., something happens, so he can't, and she needs to send him more money. Because I have been adamant with her about him being a scammer, she stopped talking to me about how much money she has been sending him, but my daughter knows that she has been sending money to him at least once a month. I have known from the very start that she is being scammed. I have told her this multiple times. My husband, my daughter's boyfriend, my mom's friends, and even her co-workers have all told her that she is being scammed. I don't know how to prove it to my mom. The only information I have is his phone number, which is a Google number, and a picture he sent her that is supposed to be his passport. I have searched the name on the passport with no luck. I have reverse image searched it, too, with no luck. Are there any resources out there to help with this? Even if she doesn't get her money back, I just want to be able to prove it to her so that she will stop sending more money. I'm so frustrated with this and scared of how much she might end up losing if I can't stop this. Update: I will be sitting down with her and showing her some videos from Dr. Phil and Social Catfish. After that, I will be taking her down to the police station to sit down and have them explain to her what is going on. I will also be contacting victim outreach and reporting to our state's elder abuse agency as per the advice of a lot of other users. Thank you, everyone. I know this is going to be a battle, but I have let this go on for far too long and should have become active about doing something a lot sooner. I didn't have the resources to do so until I made this post, so again, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wish me and my mom luck.
I was going to end my life. Instead, I impulsively spent £800. Yesterday was the closest I came to ending things. I had a plan, I had a time and place sorted. I was ready to go through with it. I was so happy and excited. I cleaned my room and sorted what I wanted to donate into bags and found a list of things that I wanted to do this year. It was small things like finishing all the books I owned, eating a slice of cheesecake on my birthday, having a bubble bath, etc. I've never been anywhere other than the small town in the area that I live. I've never been to a zoo or to an aquarium or the big city center where all the fancy shops are, or to a cafe or a restaurant or the cinema. And if I went through with my plan, I'd never see any of those places. I started writing a list of things I wanted to do before I died. I decided I wasn't going to do it. I'm quite calm about it, though I thought I would be upset. I think it's because in the back of my mind a part of me is thinking that my plan will still be here after I do everything on this list and I could end my life after I do everything on it, and that's comforting. I've never spent much money on myself before out of pure want. Ever since I was little and I realized how much everything cost, I tried to be as little of a burden as possible. I never asked my mom or dad for anything. Anything that I wanted or needed was out of my own pockets, 1 PS, 2 PS and small change saved up. Recently for Eid, a religious holiday, although I don't actually practice or believe in the faith, my mother gave my younger sister £200 so she could buy herself a new phone. She broke her previous two by throwing them in anger. When I was my sister's age, I bought my own phone completely out of my own pocket and I used that phone for years and years. It was the cheapest one I could afford at the time. I use it now. Something about that really shifted something inside me. I was saving as much as money from my part-time job, earning minimum wage, so that when I died, my mom and dad could share whatever was in my bank account. It wasn't fair that they gave my sibling money and gifts and not me. It was 2 a.m. at that point and I thought about the most frivolous unnecessary thing that I wanted for a long time. An iPad. I've always wanted one but could never justify the price or the small amount of storage. But it was 2 a.m. and I was looking at the refurbished page, and I did it. I bought an iPad, an Apple Pencil, Bluetooth keyboard and mouse and a bunch of accessories from Amazon. Then I thought about my phone and how it was slowing down, screen cracked, wasn't charging properly. And I bought an Android phone. And then a smartband. And wireless earbuds. And then I thought about how I always wanted to dye my hair. So I bought red hair dye and a developer and some hair dye accessories. I spent an estimated £900 in an hour. That was 2.5 months' wages for me. It was exhilarating. When the rush went, I panicked because I was planning to die and here I was, wasting money on things that I wouldn't be around to enjoy. And then I realized I didn't have to die. I'm getting that giddy excited feeling again. This time it's about enjoying these things and not feeling guilty that I bought them. I've never felt this much excitement over anything, other than planning my suicide, in a long time. The last time I felt genuine excitement over anything was when I was 12 and given a free book in secondary school. It's been a couple of hours since I ordered everything and the feeling of adrenaline has worn off. I still don't feel guilty. I think these impulsive purchases have saved me for another year. I hope I enjoy them when they come.
People that work or have worked in bikini waxing salons, what is the worst/disturbing experience you have come across while giving someone a bikini wax? NSFW. I have one. A girl came into my salon a month before she got married. She had never groomed her pubic hair and claimed to be a virgin. She wanted to be waxed right before her wedding. Completely natural, right? I recommended she get a wax now, and another before the big day since there was no way of knowing how her prized lady bits would react to the wax. She declined and set an appointment 3 days before her wedding. Fair enough. When she came back, I was not prepared for the amount of pubic hair she had. It was unusual for a fair-skinned blonde client to have long coarse black hair. But whatever, it's my job. So I trim her up, clean her, and prepare to wax her. Again, she had ungodly amounts of dark hair. Even trimmed, her skin was barely visible. So after inspecting her and not seeing any issues, I begin waxing. I shit you not, she had skin tags and perturbing moles that I did not see before starting. A skin tag is fleshy deposit of excess skin. They have a ton of causes, but they're often in places that sweat or rub a lot. Common on larger people, though average and thin people get them too. They usually aren't painful unless they're messed with, like trying to pop it like a pimple, scratching, attempting to remove it. You know, stuff like that. To get to the point, I pulled a strip from her labia area, and pulled off about 20 skin tags. She yelled. The entire salon heard. And then she started bleeding. Like gushing blood. We know how to handle bleeding pores. But I had never heard of this. So we're both screaming and crying and I have to call her an ambulance because she would not stop bleeding. I thought I almost killed her. Maybe not the grossest story, but it was traumatic. I changed professions soon after. I imagine her wedding night wasn't magical either. Edit. What I perceived to be skin tags could very well have been HPV. That being said, her client info form indicated she had no known illness or conditions. Also, I've waxed a few warts before. Sometimes they tear or even bleed, but they don't come off intact the way these did. Yes, obviously the room and equipment was fully sanitized after the incident. An ambulance is expensive here, in the States, but it was a necessary call. She was still bleeding heavily when the EMTs arrived and it's the responsibility of the business, from what I understand. I wasn't fired. I didn't get in any trouble. But I did feel guilty, so I voluntarily stood before my state board and told them what happened. It was fine. No repercussions. I never heard from her again, though we did attempt to contact her to check in. Nada? Yes, she was a little fat. I would say overweight, but not obese. Her hygiene seemed fine, but maybe not.
What was the best revenge you've ever gotten? Mine was in the Air Force. I had a racist for an immediate supervisor who always gave me average ratings on my performance. I didn't realize how bad I was getting screwed until one of my counterparts, who was a total screw-up, was shocked that he higher ratings than myself. A 3 is considered average, which I was getting on my reviews. This screw-up was getting 5s, which is the highest score. I was thinking, how the heck did he get a 5? This dude missed time, came to work drunk, was reprimanded for fights, been to jail, etc. My record was spotless, always the first on the job and the last to leave. Kept my uniform super clean. So I realized that I'm working twice as hard as this other dude and getting a much lower score. This was in the 1990s. I overheard a conversation with my racist supervisor one day about what he wanted to be when he leave the military. He stated that he wanted to be a highway patrol officer so that he can legally hit minorities. He always made crude jokes about Mexicans and blacks. As an African American myself, I hated this dude's guts. His leadership skills were the worst. I hated every day of working with him. One day it was his last day of work. The shop was going to throw a going away party for this racist pig. There was an option to donate $10 to the potluck to participate in the party or miss out and work. I chose to work. I'm not donating a dime to this dude's going away party. After he gracefully disappeared from the job, I thought that would be the last I've heard of him. Nope. I was wrong. Found out later that he did apply for the state highway patrol position. The timing on this particular day couldn't have been more perfect. 2 men from the highway patrol were visiting our unit and I happened to be the only person there. They asked me who's in charge? Well, I'm the only airman in the shop, so I was actually in charge. I asked them what's going on. They told me that they are doing a follow-up on a gentleman who applied for highway patrol who used to work at this unit. I told them I have detailed files on this person. What made this even better was the fact that one highway patrol officer was black, the other was Hispanic. I was so nervous in hopes that our main supervisor didn't show up because he would give this guy a decent feedback. I wanted them to hear the dark side of this scumbag. I told them that he was a decent worker at best, but here are some documents I wanted to share. Luckily I kept my old floppy disk handy with all of the stuff I wrote to the higher chain of command about this racist posse. The statements had dates and times I written down of his racist comments over the years. Too many to write in this essay. But let's just say it was 2 pages worth, front and back. The look of disgust was very apparent on their faces. One of them asked me, people like him still exist in the military? I replied shockingly, yes. They asked me, did you ever want to knock this dude the fuck out? Many times I did. To make a long story short, months went by and I didn't hear anything. Then one day I overheard a conversation about my former supervisor being turned down for his highway patrol job and was working at a Walmart as a warehouse worker. In all honesty, I take great pleasure in feeling that my sneaky swift actions were the reason. Today I messed up my life after trying fix up a new home and ended up homeless. This morning I spent 5 hours waiting with the police as my contractor cleared his tools from my torn apart house. My wife and I separated last year and I found a fixer-upper for purchase close by. A friend helped me find a contractor to fix a few things in the house while I was subleasing a place for a couple of months. This guy had health issues and took another week before showing up after he was hired. He quickly started finding more and more issues in the house and said fixing them wouldn't take too long. I trusted him since he was a friend of a friend and let him do the work. Over time the project got bigger and bigger and he kept talking me into fixing more things that were a fire hazard or not up to code. We extended the deadline by a few weeks but he never met that deadline. He would skip days and won't tell me, or say he'll cover the molding days during the weekend and just won't show up. I told him I'm going through a divorce and that I need to move in ASAP before my lease expires, and he guaranteed the house will be ready by then. That day came and the house wasn't ready. He only needed another week. He kept saying that for almost 3 months. Today I fired the contractor after another friend came to take a look and told me the house is at least a month away from ready and that I've been lied to this whole time. My contractor flipped and started threatening me. He wouldn't give me my keys back and said I was holding his stuff hostage and he's allowed to enter my house whenever to pick up his stuff. I called the police. They came and stayed with me until he cleared his stuff out of my ripped apart house and gave me my keys back. He also stole some stuff on the way out. He also asked that I paid him for the work he's done on top the $10,000 he already got from me a month ago. The only available contractors I could find so far are booked for the next 2 months, which means I need to find a new place to stay for 3 more months. They need to fix the plumbing, electrical, install floors, walls and put the kitchen back together before the house is even livable again. The electrical system is not done, the plumbing is halfway, there are no floors, all the walls are open, and he even took the shower apart. The kitchen cabinets are stacked on the floors because of a leak he discovered, and the countertop broke during the disassembly. I can't even camp in the house because there's no floors or running water. My lease expires in 3 days. I was supposed to move in 2 weeks ago. My future ex-wife tells me not to bother her with my problems and that I can't go back to sleep in my office in the house I'm still paying mortgage for. I work from home, so I have no office to go to during the day. Also, it's my birthday this weekend and I have the kids for next 5 days and nowhere to go. I really did fuck up my life. I'll be homeless in 3 days on my birthday.
What was the hardest thing you went through in life, and how did you get past it? I was repeatedly taken advantage of by a neighbor when I was 7 years old. I didn't want my mother to find out, because she was a single mother working 3 jobs to support me and my brother, and she cried enough as it was. We lived in a trailer that had holes in the floor so that sometimes raccoons and opossums would climb through. I was scared of them. The carpet was infested with fleas. I usually had flea bites all over my body. I never felt clean. We got clothes from Goodwill, but they were usually old, faded, and stained. My mother did the best she could, but we were all alone in the world. We lived in a rural area that was unforgiving of those who deviated from the norm. My mother tried to baptize me when I was a baby, only to be turned away by the local preacher because I was a bastard. A child born to parents who are not married to each other. We were not welcome in their churches, which were an important part of rural life there. I didn't have friends at school. I was weird, dirty, ugly, too quiet, etc. Even most of the teachers looked at me and my brother in disgust. We were the 30th family. I grew up with the understanding that I was worthless, that I should be ashamed of who I am. I barely said a word through most of my childhood. I didn't say a word to anyone when they pushed me around, taunted me endlessly, beat up my brother and I. I never said a word when my neighbor, who, interestingly, was widely regarded as an outstanding member of society, raped me. I led a very solitary life. My mother was usually gone at work, my brother would devote himself to his own activities, and there I was. I remember I would sit outside of my home and pretend to be a rock, because rocks didn't feel anything and they certainly didn't cry. They were indestructible, I thought. I overheard one of the other little girls discussing the prayer they said before bedtime, and I resolved to remember it. It went like this: as I lay down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I shall die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. The prayer by Kid Cudi became my favorite song because of this verse. I thought about this prayer for the rest of the day, until I went home and decided on my own version. Dear God, I don't want to live anymore. There are other people begging you to keep them alive. Let me take their place. I'll die. I was about 8 years old, but I didn't die, much to my dismay. I woke up the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. The days went by. My situation didn't greatly improve, people weren't much nicer to me, and my life didn't get easier. But I got stronger. I discovered books as a way to escape from my tedious existence, and by the time I was in 5th grade, I was reading at a college level. I grew up and gained control over my life. I was no longer the defenseless, powerless victim I had been as a child. I had power. I could do whatever I wanted. I got a job. I studied hard so I could go to a good college. I escaped from my small, unforgiving town. I have a good job now and good relationships. People who know me now would never guess I was once that hungry, miserable, terrified, beaten down little girl I had been back then. As for my family, my mother still lives in that trailer. My neighbor is long dead. My older brother still lives with my mother. He has never gotten a driver's license or a job. He doesn't leave the house very often. A part of me understands his reluctance. Why let the world do you more harm when it has already done so much? But I wish he would take the chance. I feel sad that our childhood all but destroyed him. If you want to know how to get through hard things, my answer is probably inadequate, but it is the best I have to offer. My answer is, keep going. My twin sister, while sitting 20 feet away from me, sent me a PM to my account about how I should kill myself. My mom smirked when I cried. I've been a long-time lurker here, and I just need to vent about this because I am incredibly depressed and I feel alone. I moved away from my family when I first left for college at 18. It lasted 2 years, and then it eventually went low contact because I felt guilty about not talking to them. My mom was extremely abusive. She would strangle us, punch us in the back, etc. You know how it goes. She never physically abused us when our dad was around, but the verbal abuse was enough to make him consider leaving her. Because of this, I have severe depression and PTSD, and I had to go on medical leave from college. My mom begged me to come home for around 2 months before I gave in. I missed having a family, and I am so stupid for being weak and giving in. Since I've been back, my mom has been doing weird things. She'll want me to get drunk with her, but I really can't drink alcohol because I'm on Celexa. When I refuse to drink, she'll give me the silent treatment for a few days. I'm always getting the silent treatment, and it hurts. Today, my mom asked me if I wanted to just live here and not go back to school. That made no sense. Why would I want to not complete my education? Also, I don't like the constant silent treatment, so I don't like being here. I told her that I'd rather go back to school. She started yelling about how I could just go to the community college here. She started crying about how I didn't love her, and my dad told her to stop being dramatic. My sister came in and asked what happened. When my mom told her, she didn't say anything and just went on her laptop. My twin sister is beyond crazy. She once stalked a man for 6 months because the guy told him that she didn't know what she was talking about and should shut up. She found this guy's identity in a few Reddit comments and started physically mailing him things with death threats. She signed his Reddit username to everything. If I knew she had done this, I wouldn't have come here. My sister then sent me a PM on Reddit that said, "You dumb bitch. I hate you so much. You're a piece of trash, and I'm glad you were raped. No one loves you and no one ever will, and how fucking dare you make my mom upset. She has been kind to you, and all she wanted was for you to stay here. You're never going to be anything, and I know you've been feeling suicidal, so why stop feeling that way and just go kill yourself? No one will care. Your boyfriend broke up with you last year, and I think that just goes to show that no one cares about you. I hope you get raped again, but I should stop talking before you call the cops on me like you used to do to mom when we were kids. There's so much I'd love to say to you, but I don't want you to go snitching, and I don't want to be a bully." As soon as I saw that, I started crying, and I told my dad. He said my sister was out of line, but he can't discipline her, and if that's how she feels, she is entitled to feel that way. My mom came in, saw me crying, and started laughing uncontrollably. I asked my sister why she would do something like this when I have only been nice to her. I sent her like $400 a month when I was in school because my parents are poor. I deleted my account immediately, and my sister said that she found it because she put a tracker on my laptop. My dad only said that it wasn't nice. I have no idea how to cope with this. My cousin said that I could move in with them next month when they get back in the country, but that's such a long time away.
What is the worst thing a woman can do to a man? In my long career as a paramedic, I believe I saw firsthand the worst thing a woman can do to a man. We were once called to the local state prison to transport a man to the hospital who was having chest pain. Other than that, he was pretty stable, so it was a quiet 30-minute transport to the closest emergency room. We didn't usually talk to the prisoners during transport, but somehow we started chatting, and I asked the guy what he was in for. He tells me he was sentenced to prison for about 20 years for molesting both of his daughters. I was repulsed. I just wanted this scumbag out of my ambulance immediately. I was so disgusted. But then he immediately starts telling me how it was all a setup by his ex-wife and how he's really innocent and nobody will believe him. He's on his second attorney to try to get a new trial, and he's hoping somebody will finally grant him a new opportunity to clear his name. The prison guard riding in the back of the ambulance with us, he was sitting behind the patient, looks at me, rolls his eyes, smirks, and says to me, "They all say that. Don't listen to his bullshit. He's been telling that to everyone who will listen." The prisoner looks at me for some sort of sympathy, but I just sternly look down at my patient report and tell him to lie back, rest, and stop talking. He started sobbing and cried. Even the paramedic that's supposed to be saving my life hates me. I certainly felt no sympathy for the guy at the time. I had passed judgment on him, as had the prison guard, and decided this guy was a disgusting pedophile, and I'd just as soon not have to deal with him at all. Just touching him to check his blood pressure made my skin crawl. It was approximately 2 years later when I happened upon a newspaper article in our local paper about a guy who'd been in the local prison for several years for child molestation. He'd eventually been granted a new trial, and at some point during that second trial, both of his daughters admitted that they'd been made to create this false story against their dad at the behest of his ex-wife, who wanted to punish him for the divorce. His sentence was ultimately vacated, and he was released from prison. I'm not sure what happened to the ex-wife, but I know the prosecutor said they'd be exploring charges against her. I didn't recognize the name of the prisoner in the article, but I immediately recognized his face when I saw a photo of him in court, weeping when the judge ordered him released. He was the same prisoner I'd transported 2 years before and treated like crap. The guilt I felt at that moment was overwhelming. I wanted to find a way to contact him to apologize, if he'd even remember me. I wonder to this day whether he was ever able to repair his relationship with his kids or whether he was ever able to repair his life. The guy spent some 7 years in prison based on a bullshit charge that his ex-wife put their young kids up to. It's a horrific thought, and it still haunts me to this day. What should I absolutely not do when visiting the USA? Don't get out of your car if you get pulled over by police. I was pulled over by a police officer while driving in Iowa. It was 1 week after I arrived in the USA for the first time. I had accidentally made a minor mistake by disobeying a traffic sign. Back home in Australia, it's considered polite to get out of your car and walk over to the police officer's car and hand him your license so he doesn't have to get out of his seat. I wanted to be extra polite, so I immediately jumped out of my car and walked towards his car while reaching into my back pocket. I'm lucky to be alive. If you come from a gun-free country like the UK or Australia, you don't have any natural instincts for gun culture. You don't realize that police assume that everyone is armed. Things got immediately serious. The police officer's hand went to his weapon, and I responded by dropping to my knees with my hands up. He yelled a bunch of things at me, but my memory is vague because my heartbeat was suddenly pulsing in my ears, blotting out all sound. I don't know if he drew his weapon or not. I was staring intently at the ground, shaking, and trying to project non-threatening vibes. My next memory is that there were 3 police cars around me and a bunch of cops who'd been called for backup. They were all keeping their hands close to their guns. After some time passed, a minute, 30 minutes, I have no idea, the tensions de-escalated, and they told me to get up. I gave the officer my license and tried to explain why I'd approached him. It was completely incomprehensible to him that there was a place where people didn't fear cops and vice versa at traffic stops. It was as though I was trying to tell him that I came from Narnia and our cops were all talking animals. I've spoken to several British people, New Zealanders, and Australians who have shared almost identical stories. They really need to put signs up in all major US airports. There's an article that states, in Australia, a woman was shot and killed by an American cop. To me, the chilling part of the story is this passage. When police arrived, Ruschek Damone approached the driver's side of the squad car, and Noor, who was in the passenger's seat, shot her through the open window. In Australia, we would think it perfectly normal to approach a police car to talk to the police. She probably had no idea that she could be in danger. The American police are far too ready to kill. It's sickening. It turns out that getting out of your car when police stop you is a generational thing in Australia. When I grew up in Australia, it was considered polite. I've moved back to Australia again, and it is no longer the norm. We still don't worry that cops will shoot us, though. For the love of God, please don't get out of your car if stopped by police. They will assume you are armed, and they might shoot you. As a teacher, has a student's work ever made you concerned for their safety? A 5th grade girl wrote a story. It was about a girl who was very unhappy and thought of killing herself. Then she described the girl, and the description was of herself. The fictional girl even had the same birth date. She ended the story by saying that she had talked the girl into not taking her life and that she was okay now. A few days later, while students were working on an assignment, I looked over at her desk. She had a large plastic bag, and it was full of red pills with a few yellow pills. I walked over to her desk and said, "Give me that," and she handed it to me, then went to work on her assignment. I took the bag and walked out the door, leaving the students working alone. I was a little worried about leaving them unsupervised, but I thought I had better take care of this bag of pills first. I took it up to the office and gave it to the principal. I told her the name of the girl from whom I had taken it and also about the essay. Then I went back to class and tried to pretend that I was having a normal day. I think I succeeded. After about an hour, the school secretary came to relieve me and asked me to go back to the office. By this time, I had printed out the girl's story. I took it with me to the office. The girl's mother had been called in. When she saw the pills and the story, she began to sob. We decided that we would continue with a normal school day unless something else involving the girl happened. At the end of the day, the mother came a bit before school was actually out, checked her daughter out, and drove her up to the psychiatric ward at one of our local hospitals. She had already registered her, so all she had to do was walk in the door. The girl remained on the psychiatric ward for 6 weeks. During this time, she tried to slit her wrists but luckily could not find anything sharp enough to do serious damage and also made the cuts incorrectly. After 6 weeks, the psychiatrists felt that she was no longer a danger to herself and released her. She would be back in class the next day. Nobody had told the other students what had happened, but somehow they all knew. So, the principal, the counselor, the DARE officer, and I had a meeting with the class and discussed how we should welcome her back. We appealed to them not to do or say anything that might cause her stress. They were good kids. They agreed. What she had done should have made her ineligible to graduate from DARE, drug abuse resistance education, which was a big thing in 5th grade. but the DARE officer said that he did not want to lock her out because he did not want to cause any setbacks. He said that, since she had straightened herself out and was no longer a threat to herself, he was going to let her graduate, wear the DARE shirt, and participate in the musical program. The students agreed that they wanted her to graduate with them. The next day, they welcomed her back. Some girls made a point of including her in play on the playground and also sat with her at lunch. Nobody mentioned the suicide attempt or the scars on her wrists. I told you they were good kids. 8 years later, I had a phone call. It was the girl. She was now a senior in high school in another school district and was graduating. She told me she wanted to thank me for saving her life. What is the best revenge that you got on someone who was rude to you? When I first moved to Iceland, my next door neighbor had all-night parties every day of the week. The music was so loud that everything in my apartment shook. I had one of those apps on my phone that tells you what song is playing in the background, and it pinged every few minutes from my bedside table because it could pick up so clearly what music he was playing. After a week of this, I knocked on his door and asked him to turn the music down. He was quite friendly, said sorry, and told me proudly all about how he was a music producer and his speakers were just so powerful it was impossible to keep the volume low. I asked him to at least keep it down at night so I could sleep, and he said he would try. He didn't try, and it continued like this for another week. I knocked on his door again, but this time he was really pissed at me. He told me, "Do you realize this is the second time you've complained this week?" I told him, yes, I did realize. And did he realize this was the 14th night in a row that he'd played his music so loud I couldn't even hear my own TV at full volume? So he got really aggressive and flippant and told me, "Well, this is Iceland. I'm allowed to play my music. No one else has a problem with it, so if you don't like it, go back to the country you came from. Or call the police, I don't care." Then he slammed the door in my face, and through the door I could hear him laughing with his friends about it. I felt pretty down and frustrated about it, and soon after I got really sick with flu, probably from the stress and lack of sleep. So once a day I would take one of my used snotty tissues and wipe it all over his door handle. Sure enough, for about a week the party stopped, I assume because he got flu and was too sick to throw them. Oh, that little window of quiet was such bliss. But then one Wednesday morning I was woken at 5 a.m. with the sound of loud dance music and lots of girls whooping and screaming. I remembered his words, "Call the police if you don't like it," so I did. The cops showed up and shut the party down. Later the next evening there was a knock at my door, and it was him. "Did you call the police on me last night?" he asked, extremely put out. I told him, yes I did. Indignantly he asked, "Can you not call the police on me? Next time just come and speak to me." I told him, "But I did speak to you about it before and you were just rude." Not knowing what to say, he just looked at me for a few moments, then said in a pointless and bitter threat, "Just don't call them again, okay?" I replied, "Okay. If you don't keep me awake all night, then I won't call them." It was kind of okay for a few weeks, but then got noisy again. Finally, he couldn't resist and threw another party. As it happens, I had friends staying with me and they came into my bedroom at 2 a.m. and asked me to do something because they couldn't sleep. So I called the cops, who shut the party down. A few weeks later he was kicked out of his apartment. It turns out that he wasn't a music producer, but he was a drug dealer, and the police arrested him that night and his landlord was informed. I found out later that every single person in the apartment block had been complaining about him for months, but I guess he'd never dared any of them to call the police. I felt like I did everyone a massive favor by taking him on. And wow! It felt so good when he was finally gone. What huge scandal happened at your middle school? I have witnessed several of those, but oh boy, one stands out from the rest. It was grade 7. There was a girl, Vanessa, in my class. Vanessa was the school bully. She always used to harass kids that she didn't think were as high as her, start unnecessary fights, get in people's faces, insult teachers, etc. She was a bitch, an annoying, callous bitch, so I used to keep away from her as much as I could. She also apparently had gangsta friends and powerful connections. She was also quite pretty, so basically most girls in my class were jealous of her, which made her even more hated. But none of them were brave enough to call her out for her bullshit. Except for one girl, that is, Deepika, a usually timid person, decided to stand up to Vanessa. But she didn't realize just how dangerous Vanessa was. Whenever Vanessa did mean stuff, Deepika used to go up to her and give her a piece of her mind and tell her that she needed to stop her shit. So because of this, Vanessa and her entourage started to target Deepika, saying all kinds of hurtful, racist things to her, like how she needs to take her nasty butt back to her country, that her parents were little idiots for bringing her into the world, that her country was too poor to produce condoms and that's the only reason she was born, etc. This verbal abuse went on for weeks, until things got a tad bit worse. One day, during recess break, Deepika thought that she had had enough of Vanessa's fuckery and that somehow it was her destiny to put an end to it. So she walked up to Vanessa, who was sitting 2 tables away from where I was. My friends and I looked at them. Deepika challenged her to a fist fight, saying that if Vanessa lost, she would have to retire from her career as a bully. Vanessa, being a brawler, of course agreed, and their fight was set to take place during their lunch break the next day. News of the fight spread throughout the fucking school, but most of my teachers unfortunately dismissed it and said it was just going to be a squabble between children, even though I repeatedly told them that it'd be way worse than that and urged them to intervene. They did not. All the kids in the grade were losing their fucking minds, and I, along with some other kids, advised Deepika not to do this. But she didn't listen to me or them. Stupid choice. I admired her courage, but I already knew it wasn't going to go well for poor Deepika. At lunch the next day, me and the entire fucking grade went to a secluded area that was a little outside the school, where the fight was supposed to happen. Deepika was there before us. Vanessa and her entourage weren't. We all then waited for a few minutes and wondered if she was ever going to show up. A few more minutes passed by, and there was still no sign of Vanessa. The crowd was getting infuriated at this point, and some kids started to leave. Then, out of fucking nowhere, a small pebble came flying through the air and hit Deepika right in the eye and got lodged inside. I think a slingshot was used. Deepika screamed. Vanessa suddenly appeared from the opposite direction where we were all standing, and then she charged at Deepika. She tackled her to the ground and started punching her eye, where the pebble was stuck. Her entourage joined her. Gosh, I'm cringing as I type this. I was completely horrified and ran back to the school to find a teacher. I found one and told him what was going on. He and a group of several other teachers came to the area where it was all going down. Vanessa and her friends were still beating the living SHT out of Deepika. The teachers broke it up, and an ambulance was called right away. I don't know what happened to the rest of the students who were present there, but I was called to the principal's office, and many important teachers and the principal questioned me heavily in there. I told them all the details, and they let me go. Over the next few days, Vanessa and a ton of other students were expelled. The police were involved, investigations took place, and teachers were fired. It was crazy. Deepika didn't come to school until after the end of the year, in grade 8. When I first saw her after all those months, she looked like she had made a full recovery. But her I didn't, and she was wearing an eye patch. Everyone praised her for having the balls to stand up to Vanessa, and she went on to become quite popular in the school. In a way, she actually did put an end to Vanessa's bullying. You go, girl. I'm tired of people saying that looks don't matter. They matter above all else if you're ugly. Discrimination against looks is something that transcends race, gender, and sexuality. As humans, we are naturally drawn to more aesthetically pleasing faces that have more symmetry and harmony. Even in the animal kingdom, the undesirables will die off faster than the rest. The halo effect is real, and so is pretty much all privilege. Even average people can benefit from this with great styling and confidence. However, ugly people, no matter how confident they are or how well they're styled, will always be seen as ugly and treated unfairly. Go on any social experiment that has been carried out, and you'll see the stark difference in how attractive and unattractive people are treated. Looks do matter. If looks didn't matter, the cosmetic surgery industry would not be making billions a year over people's insecurities. If looks didn't matter, you wouldn't have influencers making a fortune from doing the bare minimum on camera. If looks didn't matter, you wouldn't have the top models making millions for being beautiful and being who advertisers want as the face of their companies to sell products. If looks didn't matter, you wouldn't have a Hollywood where anyone who's less than model level pretty gets boxed into the ugly roles. Looking at you, Disney. If looks didn't matter, the pop industry would seek talent over sex appeal. If looks didn't matter, serial killers like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer wouldn't have fan bases devoted to them, and people would see them entirely for the monsters that they were. On the same note, a picture of young Joseph Stalin went viral years ago, and people went crazy over it and were willing to overlook his actions because he was good looking. And whenever there is a high-profile case of a person who goes missing, it's always a good-looking white woman. Looks play a factor in which crime stories to share with the world. Average or attractive people are more favored by society. Even in jobs, people want average or attractive people to lead. No one wants ugly people at the forefront of anything. I saw posts from unattractive people saying how important looks were for getting into jobs in law and medicine, jobs where your capabilities should take precedence. Ugly people get hated on by everyone in society, even by other ugly people. It's acceptable to tell them that they won't ever find love or happiness. It's acceptable to laugh about their looks, to deny them jobs, and to not want to be around them. Parents have the fear that their child may be ugly because they know the torment that ugly people go through. Ugly is synonymous with horrible. It's especially worse if you're a woman, because much of a woman's worth is placed on her beauty. Men are, of course, victims of this too, but there is less leeway for women. Why do you think there's a higher concentration of male celebrities and influencers who aren't conventionally attractive than female ones? Women are constantly rated on their looks, and friends of guys dating less attractive women will talk badly about their partners and laugh at their friend for dating a 4. Also, another thing that annoys me is when people conflate being ugly with being fat. If losing 80 pounds, which I know is not an easy feat, BTW, and changing your hair and clothes suddenly makes you attractive, I'm afraid you were never ugly to begin with. You can be fat and have a pretty face. Meanwhile, thin, feminine-looking women like myself can still be ugly due to not having the markers of attractiveness, facial symmetry, harmony, and decent bone structure. This is why ugly people can become bitter and jealous, as the cards are stacked against us and they won't ever change. It's innate to feel annoyance or even anger towards ugly people. If you were armed with a gun, would you have the courage to shoot a burglar in your home? I faced this situation when I was about 11 or 12 years old, way back in the mid-70s. For several months, my mom had been working with the police to get rid of the older teens that were selling drugs in the park behind our house. My mom had no fear, and she would walk our dogs in that park, and the drug dealers would try to intimidate her, and our dogs would protect her and go after the drug dealers. Mom would take pictures of the drug dealers selling from the second story of our house and give them to the police, who would arrest them, but they were juveniles and would be back out in a week or two. My mom was a single mom of 5 and an RN. One night, she took the PM shift of a friend who needed the evening off. My mom normally worked days. I am the oldest, so I was caring for my siblings. The drug dealers knew my mom was not at home. Her car was not in the driveway. They decided they were going to teach her a lesson. So they came armed to the house and started kicking on the door. They made it clear that they were going to harm us kids. I had my loaded hunting rifle in my bedroom closet. I grew up at a time when people kept loaded firearms in the home because an unloaded one was useless. Kids were taught from an early age to never touch a firearm unless they had permission. I started shooting at age 5 and was given the hunting rifle at age 8, when I first went hunting. Since then, I was always stored in my bedroom closet, loaded, and my siblings knew to never touch it. As the oldest, it was my responsibility to protect them if the need ever arose. I told my sister to get the others, take them upstairs, and call the police. I grabbed my rifle and positioned myself in the hallway in front of the door. The police dispatcher told my sister officers were on their way. Then the door gave way, and 4 older teens were pushing through the doorway. The one in front fired off his handgun. At that moment, I started shooting. I fired off 3 rounds quickly. I had a lever-action rifle, but I was very familiar with how to use it. The one that fired off a round was hit twice and went down fast. The second round that hit him went through him and hit the person behind him. The third round hit the third person, went through him, and ended up in the wall of the house across the street. The fourth person all of a sudden decided he needed to be somewhere else and took off running. I could hear the sirens just before I started shooting. The police showed up about 2 or so minutes after the shooting ended. The first officer on the scene told me I was a hero. I did not feel like one. I was angry at these idiots for forcing me, a young kid, to do what I had to do and take my life. My mom did come home from work when she was called by the police and told what had happened. The police and my mother agreed that it was best if I was not told what the outcome was. I was certain, though, that the one who was shot twice died instantly. I was using a hunting round meant for deer. This was at close range, 7 feet or less. I am nearly certain the third guy died. He did not look so good. The second one only took the bullet after it went through his friend first, and then his friend fell on top of him, so he did not get the full force. I could hear him until he was taken away by the ambulance. I had nightmares for a long time. Taking a life is no fun. I would do it again if some idiot were to put my life or the lives of my family or loved ones in danger. As a result of my experiences, though, I do my best to stay away from any situation that could go bad. I would rather walk away than stick around and have something go south. Because I know what would happen if I were to hesitate in such a situation. If I ever find someone in my house that does not belong there, I will shoot first. My state has the castle doctrine. This means anyone found inside your home without your permission is presumed to be a danger to you and to those who are legally in the home. You have the legal right to use deadly force against them until they are no longer a threat to you. So I can use my firearm until they are outside the home or incapacitated to the point that they can no longer cause harm. I made a joke and my husband stormed off. My husband, 30 meters, and I, 27F, have a great relationship. Of course I can't say we haven't had our occasional bumps, but it's honestly a dream come true all the way through. Our wedding was April 2021 and we both cried like babies that day, and since then the sailing has been smoother than soap. This afternoon, he and I came home after a little lunch outing with our newly engaged friends Kai and Marie. It went great but was like just another outing. Nothing special, though we got some bomb pasta back home which I'm currently shoveling into my gob since it's too chilly for ice cream. We live in a super tiny apartment and so he showered first while I got the leftovers into the fridge and stuff. I went in after him, finished my shower and put some lotion on my palm. I accidentally squeezed too much and dabbed some of it away. After I rubbed it on my face I still had some of the leftover on my finger and I did exactly what any perfectly sane person would do. On my thumb, I whipped up a little smiley face and some spiky hair to create Lotion Man. I came out of the bathroom, giggling about it, and said something along the lines of hey, look, it's Lotion Man. He didn't really react, he just looked at my hand and blinked at me. I honestly was just goofing around and started making a silly voice and saying some random SHT sprinkled with some inside jokes. I was blabbing for about a minute before he just up and left. I was of course completely oblivious as he grabbed some of his SHT and I just was smiling and asking where he was going in a playful way. He has a huge truck and we just returned from a trip so he has enough stuff to last him weeks, so it didn't really dawn on me that he was leaving until he drove away. I honestly feel like Boo Boo the fool for making such a stupid joke and then letting him leave just like that. I texted him a few times and he just said that he's thinking about things and that he's at his brother Tyler's place. I've been texting him non-stop but he hasn't been responding or even reading any of it. He also sleeps really early so I doubt I can get in contact with him anytime soon. His brother isn't responsive either so I'm just leaving my phone on the nightstand and holding my breath. I don't think it's really dawned on me yet. I stared blankly at the door for like 10 minutes before I got off my butt and actually tried contacting him. I've been with this man for years and I'm always cracking cheesy jokes. I feel stupid and like SHT for making Lotion Man and continuing after no response instead of just shutting up and accepting that I'm unfunny. At the same time I'm just confused. He's never been at this point even in our rougher patches. The worst we've done is just take breaks from SX or just talk to one another a little less. Wasn't planning on getting into my SX life but honestly I'm just rambling at this point. I'm all for giving him space but I can't say I'm not hurt he's just leaving. And the process of divorce is just so. I don't even want to think about this anymore. Was making Lotion Man as big of a mistake as I think it was? Any advice on getting him back home? What is the weirdest thing you've seen your child do? When my son was around the age of 5, he was playing quietly in his bedroom as he often did. I was in my bedroom across the hall folding laundry on the bed. I could hear him start talking, and at first, I thought maybe he was talking to one of his stuffed animals or something. After a minute, I realized that it sounded as if he was responding to someone who was asking him questions, so I walked across the hall to his room. On his bed, my son had placed one of those funny tall red and white cat in the hat hats, and it was encircled by a line of flowers that we'd gotten in a Polynesian restaurant. He said, "Okay, I'll ask," and then looked up at me where I was standing in the doorway to his bedroom. "Mama, can I have a picture from one of your magazines? It has to be a picture of a nice woman with brown hair, about to be here," and he gestured just below his shoulders. Hesitantly, I agreed, but I asked him why he needed it. "The nice lady needs a funeral. She didn't get one before." I was really freaked out by this time, but I didn't show it because I didn't want my sweet boy to be embarrassed or to think he'd done anything weird. At the time, we actually lived adjacent to a very nice public cemetery, so I was telling myself that my son was probably just reenacting a funeral, as they were often taking place nearby where we could see them from our upstairs windows. I went downstairs and found a picture in the magazine, meeting the necessary description of a nice lady with brown hair slightly below her shoulders. Upstairs I went with the picture, and handed it to my son. He took the magazine picture and propped it up in the center of the lay, so that the back of it was resting against the red and white striped hat. "The hat is the tombstone," he replied, as though he knew I was wondering. "Now we have to hold hands and close our eyes," he said. We did, and then he said, "Okay, she's happy now," and she left. Creepy. After that day, I would see strange things around the house now and then, like the time I found hardened blue candle wax dripped across the hardwood floor in the living room. One morning, I was getting ready to leave for work after I had already gotten my son on the school bus, and the wooden rocking chair in the living room was rocking as though someone had just stood up from it. I was the only one in the house at the time. There were lots of other bizarre happenings, but fortunately, none of them involved my son. We moved away from that house after having lived there about 2 years. My husband, now ex-husband, had reached the point where he didn't even like to be alone in the house. I wasn't that afraid, but it was a bit unsettling. Final update. My family wants to reconnect after 6 years. My mom was the bridge of communication between me and my daughters. I messaged her that I wanted to meet my daughters in a public place and she recommended a park and we met yesterday. When I got there, my daughters had already arrived. I only had a few seconds to process seeing them for the first time in more than half a decade because Jane, my 24-year-old, jumped on me. She was crying and kept saying she was sorry and asked me to not hate them. We hugged for a few minutes. It seemed like she didn't want to let me go. It took Claire, my 18-year-old, to take Jane off me. Tori, my 22-year-old, asked me how I was. I looked at her for a few seconds. I was still surprised to see how much she had grown in the last years, but I also kind of saw the last 6 years flashing through my eyes. For a while after the divorce, I just looked at pictures of me, Sarah and the girls together and remembering the good old days and started wondering if living was still worth it. After a few seconds, I told Tori I had gotten a cat. I said that he was a great cat and my best friend and if it wasn't for him I wouldn't be here speaking to her. As soon as I said this, all my daughters started crying. I was looking at them, crying inside but somehow still able to maintain my posture. They all said they were sorry for not believing me and begged me to forgive them. I told them I still loved them more than anything but it would take time for me to truly forgive them and that they would have to show me by their actions and not their words how sorry they were. I noticed Jane was wearing a ring, so I asked her about it. She told me she had gotten married to her long-time boyfriend 2 years ago. At this point I was about to burst into tears knowing I had missed my daughter's wedding. I just asked if he walked down the aisle and she quietly said yes. I just couldn't do it anymore and started crying my heart out. I had to sit down. That a-hole stole everything I held dear and robbed me of one of the moments I was longing the most for, walking my daughter down the aisle. I was ugly crying and I could tell Jane was sad as well. I told her that I would get over it and not to worry about it. She just hugged me again silently. We stayed like that for what seemed a long time. After we broke off the hug, Jane said she was sorry once again. I told my daughters that I needed a few days but I would like to go on family therapy with them. They agreed. Me and my daughters were catching up about each other's lives and it felt good to have a normal conversation with them. They gave me their phone number, we said our goodbyes and I hugged every single one of them tightly for a long time. My girlfriend's ex showed up to my apartment. I live in a big city in my own apartment. My girlfriend, Lily, lives with her roommates, but if I'm being honest she basically lives over here 80% of the time. Early today/yesterday while I was at the gym with my friend, Mike, she texted me that she had an old friend she hasn't seen in a while that's in town and that it would be nice to have a quiet place to catch up. I said they could use my apartment and that I'd go out for dinner with Mike so they'd have time to catch up. During this time I'm at the gym so I was in a rush. I didn't ask who she was inviting over. Well apparently I should, as the old friend she was apparently catching up with alone in my apartment was her only ex-boyfriend Kyle. Around 30ish minutes after this conversation I get a text from her saying they're at the apartment. I just said bed and continued with my friend. Mike and I finished our workout around 7 p.m. and decided we'd go to Whole Foods as their hot/salad bars got some great food. We ate there and finished around 8:30ish. I'm on my way home now, and honestly I wasn't expecting anything other than just saying hi and heading my ass to bed. SHT had been a long ass day and honestly I was just ready to get to sleep. I arrived home around 9 p.m. and at this point I had no idea if her friend was still over or not. I was secretly hoping they weren't as I didn't feel like socializing at all, but hey, I'll take one for the team. When I walked in the apartment I saw some big ass Timberland boots that obviously are a man's. I'm immediately like FCK, her friend brought her boyfriend. I'm going to have to stay up and socialize now. I take off my shoes and jacket and start heading down the mini hallway. As I enter the living area I see my girlfriend sitting on the couch with a man at separate ends but staring right at each other talking. My girlfriend notices me and jumps a little. I didn't really find this odd at the time but now I think back on it makes sense. At this point I'm still completely oblivious. I say hello and start walking towards the man. I'm looking around the house at this point for her friend. Honestly I just thought she was in the bathroom or some SHT. I shake the guy's hand and say some SHT like hey I'm Lily's boyfriend. He replied back in a cocky ass way with some I'm Kyle, Lily's ex. I was like oh my fault, I thought you were her friend's boyfriend. Then it got a little quiet and I rapidly came to the realization that my girlfriend has been alone with her ex in my apartment for the last couple hours. I look at my girl and say, so I'm taking this as your old friend? She said yeah in a soft ass voice. At this point I wasn't letting myself jump to any conclusions but I'm tired and I don't feel like socializing. I'm also now upset that my girl was just chilling with her ex in my apartment. It got quiet again and these two made zero effort to continue whatever convo they were having just moments ago. Lily asks how my day was and I was like it was fine I guess, again getting the vibe I'm interrupting something. At this point I'm fed up. Only like a minute or so had passed since my question to her. And I look at him and asked Kyle, hey do you mind ending it here for today? I actually got some things I gotta talk to Lily about. He said some. She invited me over though and we're still reminiscing on the good old days. I look at Lily. She can't even look me in the eyes. I look back at Kyle and say alright, let me rephrase it, this is my apartment and I'm telling you to leave. He then looks at her and says, do you want me to leave? At this point, and I'm not proud of it, I completely lose my SHT. Saying what the FCK do you mean by that? I don't give a SHT if she wants you to leave or not. I'm telling you to get the FCK out of my house. Lily is telling me to calm down and turns and tells him he needs to leave. Kyle gets up and heads towards the hallway to get his things. I follow and he ends up leaving. Update 1. My girlfriend's ex showed up to my apartment. I come back and Lily is now pissed at me saying I embarrassed her. I embarrassed you? She then goes on about how my reaction is totally uncalled for as she told me he was coming over and asked. I was like no Lily, you said a effing friend was coming over, an effing friend. Not once you mentioned this friend was a male, much less your effing ex. She then says my reaction was bullshit and that I acted like an ass. I tell her you were with your effing ex in my apartment. Do you not understand how much of a FCK you that comes across as? I then asked why the FCK y'all were meeting in the first place and she tells me he's going through rough times and needs someone to lean on. And that she just wanted to be there for him as he's a nice person and that by hanging with him in my apartment it shows nothing shady is going on. I explain how that is bullshit and that if my ex started having issues and I was the one comforting her she would be pissed. She was like no, she'd understand because she has empathy. I was like that's bullshit Lily, you got pissed at me at the gym cause I smiled when a girl complimented my form when lifting. She then was like she's done talking and stormed out. I didn't say anything. I didn't chase. I didn't reach out. I just sat on the couch and thought about what the FCK just happened. I then called my father who gave me some great advice. She then texted me these 2 hours ago. Can we talk? I'm sorry for not telling you it was my ex that I invited over. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Nothing happened. Nothing is going to happen. I love you. He messaged me out of the blue he needed someone to talk to. I didn't think that much of it. I'm sorry for deceiving you. That sounds like BS, right? I didn't think much of it then, followed by sorry for deceiving you, like obviously you did think about it or you would have been truthful. I wanted to talk to him at your place because I didn't want you to assume something else was going on. Please talk to me, I love you. Obviously if she sees this she'll know I'm talking about us, but she doesn't use Reddit. I haven't responded yet. I'm leaning towards wanting to break things up with her after talking about all this with my pops. Not for her talking to him, but for how I felt in the moment it all was happening. It's a huge red flag for me that she said old fiend instead of ex. I still don't get it. I'm the moment of me getting visibly upset with her ex. She didn't take my side once. When I was nice before I even recognized him, it felt like I was the odd man out. I just felt like she doesn't respect me. Not on some 1950s SHT where the woman has to respect the man, but if the roles were reversed and I was with my ex at her house, I would have backed my girl when she was getting mad. I would have called my ex out for talking cocky to my girl-ect. I'm still very pissed, so I don't think I should be talking to her right now. It's currently around 3 a.m. Honestly, I'm just effing tired if I'm pissed. What is an excuse to call off of work that a boss can't argue with? My father had one honest employee. In the early 80s, AG, an indigenous American, got married at age 40, which was also when he got his first job. He told my dad, "Women are all the time wanting things they don't need, and that is why I need a job." For the first 40 years of his life, AG got by picking moss, peeling chitim, and doing the occasional odd job. All he spent his money on was beer and cigarettes. He provided himself with food from hunting, fishing, and gathering plant life, and he lived a simple life. Then he met a lady and they got married. Then the reality of this world hit him like a ton of bricks. He had to get a job. My father owned and operated a small hardwood mill in the coastal hills of Oregon. He never concerned himself with the usual rigmarole of a business seeking help. He did not interview or have applications. Most of his staff was acquired through word of mouth. People who had never worked in a mill before started on the green chain. As a side note, I started working at this mill when I was 8. Mom would take me down to the mill on Sundays after church to hang out with Dad. After a few weeks, he put a shovel in my hand to shovel sawdust. I'd do that for a few minutes and then go back to watching my dad maintain the machines and get them ready for Monday morning. Then when I was 10 or 11, I graduated to a splitting maul to process lily pads into firewood. And at 14, in the summer between 8th grade and high school, I started pulling green chain. And by 18, I graduated into a job that operated a saw. AG was hired to stack lumber. He was good at it, but not altogether fast. A few weeks after he started, he called Dad up at 5 in the morning on Monday to say he was too drunk to come to work. My dad just said, "Okay, just come on in on Tuesday." Dad called AG his only honest employee. AG worked for the business for several years. With his other employees, Dad said that they had more deaths and resurrections in their family than Jesus Christ. He wished that they would have all been like AG and just be honest with why you can't report to work. He would rather hear, "I am too wasted to work" or "my hangover is too terrible" than a dishonest excuse. Unfortunately, the rest of the American business fabric or tapestry can't tolerate honesty, especially when it comes to employees and substance use. Ever been to heaven before? I have. Quick background: when I was younger, I was a very sick child, constantly in and out of hospital. At 2.5, I contracted pertussis encephalopathy, basically an infection to the brain. I was having seizure after seizure. My siblings were brought in to say goodbye to me before I was being transported to another hospital. They were told they'd never see me again. On the way in the ambulance, my heart stopped 3 times. The third, they thought they'd lost me but managed to bring me back after a few minutes. My parents were told I had a 50-50 chance, but that if I lived, I'd be in a vegetative state. Spoiler alert, I was neither and managed to come out of it absolutely fine. The doctors said they never saw someone come out of what I did, and to this day talk about it when I see them. Now here's where it gets weird. Fast forward to when I'm 3, fully recovered, and we as a family are going through family photos. I point out one of my grandmother, who died years before I was born, and said there's Nanny Collins. My family were shocked because there's no photos of her around the house and had never been shown one. There was no way I knew what she looked like. Curious, they ask me, "How do you know that?" And I reply, "I was up in her house playing with Anne." They ask, "My cousin Annie who's my age?" I tell them no, not Annie, Anne. At this point they're freaked out. My cousin Annie is named after her aunt and who died when she was a year and a half. There is no way I knew about this because she died 30 years before this incident. Then I said the thing that struck them most. I tell them I was playing with Anne and her toys, but Nanny Collins told me I had to go home to Mummy and Daddy, that I wasn't ready to stay here yet. I truly believe I died, went to whatever kind of afterlife there is, but my grandmother saved me. It explains how I came out of what I did when my chances were literally death or living dead. For a few years after this I still spoke of my Nanny Collins and told my family that whenever I was sad she would come and cheer me up. I would go to her grave and talk to her like we were having conversations. Then one day, I told them that she said I didn't need her anymore, and after that day I never spoke of her again. I truly believe my nanny was there for me through my tough childhood years. I sadly don't remember these things because I suspect she stopped showing to me when I was old enough to remember. I wish I did remember, but all my family members do. Even my aunts and uncles talk about this and how I spoke about her all the time. Nanny Collins, thank you for saving my life. My M27 girlfriend, 26F, went into a hot tub with two co-workers, Latam 20S, in the middle of the night. Last night my girlfriend of 2 years went out with her co-workers around 11:30 p.m. and she said she came back around 4 a.m. Maya's was in bed when she left home. She works in investment banking, which is very male-dominated, and it isn't uncommon for her and her co-workers to go out to fancy bars/clubs/restaurants and party until very late, since the firm/clients pays for everything and it's a work hard play hard industry. Today morning she was telling me about her night like she usually does, but this time it was a little bit different. She was out drinking with around 5 to 6 male co-workers. She's the only woman on the banking team. Until around 2, at which point most of them tapped out and went home, and it was just her and two co-workers, late M20S, neither of whom I know. Now she didn't tell me the full story or go into more detail as she had to get to work this morning, but she said they went up to one of their condo's rooftop pool and they all jumped in and that it was very cold, and after which she went into the hot tub with them. I'm not sure how long they were there for, but this is all happening around 2 to 3 a.m. She said she kept her clothes on in the pool and hot tub, but the two guys didn't. I'm assuming they weren't fully nude and had briefs on. She also told me while they were up on the rooftop one of the guys asked her to go home with him, but the other guy told him she has a boyfriend, and that's when she ended the story. I don't know if this was before/in/after the pool and hot tub. Also, I'm assuming she later had to go into the guy's condo to dry off, but she didn't mention anything about that and she didn't say whose condo it was. Now I trust her and don't think she has it in her to cheat. Am I an idiot? But I'm not comfortable with this, and maybe her recalling it last night was understated, I don't know. What would you all do in this situation? I haven't spoken to her yet since I don't want to blow up at her, but I also don't want to bottle this up. She showed me the wet, pool-smelling clothes, and the coworker whose condo they went to is apparently married with kids, but not the guy who asked her to go home with him. Also, I was awake when she left, so it's not like she snuck out as to why she left at 11:30. In her industry this is pretty normal, and we live downtown, so everything is within walking distance or a short Uber away. My 5-year-old son maliciously complied when I told him to get in the bath. I'm a father to a 6-year-old boy and, like many parents, my wife and I have a system for his nightly routine. One of us does the bath and pre-bedtime tasks and the other reads the bedtime story and sits with him for a few minutes while he falls asleep. This particular story unfolds on a night about a year ago when he was 5. It was my turn to handle the bath and pre-bedtime routine. It was just another evening in our household. We had finished our dinner, and it was time for my son's bath. The process was always the same. He would pee, undress, and then hop into the bath. My son, being a typical 5-year-old, loved to stall any process that he could. On this particular evening, he was undressing at a pace that would make a sloth look speedy, all the while trying, and failing, to suppress his laughter. I had a pile of work waiting for me, and my patience was wearing thin. I needed him to get in the bath so I could finish up my work for the day. He had managed to take off everything but his socks when I finally lost my patience. Please just get in the bath, I pleaded, hoping to expedite the process. He looked at me, a mischievous glint in his eyes, and said, "Okay, if you say so." He then moved to step into the bath, pausing just long enough for me to notice that his socks were still on his feet. He was standing there, one foot on the bathroom floor, hands gripping the edge of the tub, and the other foot hovering just above the water. The pose was oddly reminiscent of a dog peeing on a fire hydrant. As I opened my mouth to point out his still socked feet, he plunged his foot into the water, quickly followed by the other. He stood there, both sock-clad feet soaking in the bath water, looking up at me with the biggest grin on his face. I was dumbstruck for a moment before he said, "You told me to get in, so I got in." The absurdity of the situation hit us both at the same time, and we burst into laughter. "Stop telling you I feel sick? Okay, Mom." Many years ago, before people had cell phones and tablets, it was difficult to stay entertained, or keep in contact with friends if you were too far away. I was a teenager who liked watching TV, listening to top 40 music, going to the mall, and hanging with friends. My parents were divorced, and I spent every other weekend with my dad, who lived out of town, so I only got alternate weekends in town to spend with friends. Then my mom started dating this guy, and eventually I had to go with my mom to spend weekends at his place. In town, but downtown, far from our house, and no other kids around. Now my weekends at home were spent at his place, instead of at home/hanging out with friends. It was this small one-bedroom apartment and I had to sleep on the guy's sofa. Plus, he had no TV, and his idea of fun was to go on nature walks, go shopping at weird places, cook strange food, or go to a classical music concert or a jazz club. Or maybe stay home and read or play musical instruments. Some of these don't seem so bad now as an adult, but kid me, I just wanted to do typical teen things. Plus I was a picky eater and I hate all the weird food they cooked. Since I didn't want to go there, I would often tell my mom I was sick and ask to stay home, I was the youngest and older siblings were home but provided little supervision. Sometimes she would let me, but other times she would insist I go along too. One time, I was truly feeling ill, like I was going to throw up. My mom announced we were going to her boyfriend's place for the weekend. I told her I felt sick, but she immediately cut me off, said she was tired of hearing about it and I needed to stop saying I was sick. So I packed my bag, and stopped telling my mom how sick I felt. Along came the boyfriend in his fancy car to pick us up. We made it 2 blocks from the house before my stomach proved the fact that I was actually sick this time. He quickly put the back window down, and I almost made my head out the window in time, but not totally. He immediately turned the car around and took us back home. The best part? He was so focused on getting the interior of his vehicle cleaned, I swear the smell lingered somewhat anyway, that he failed to notice the part that splashed down the outside of the vehicle when I did finally get my head out. By the time he got that cleaned off, it had etched some of the paint color off the car, and it was permanently stained. Well, at least I kept quiet about feeling sick. My boyfriend put his hands around my neck in an argument and now I'm stuck. I guess I kind of just want support and maybe some advice. Obviously, I'm breaking up with him. We argued and it led to him holding me down as he choked me screaming at me. I don't really remember it if I'm honest. I tend to block out things like that. So far, I don't have any bruises that I can really see. My throat hurts though, and so does my arm. I feel weird, I'm furious, and I'm heartbroken. Feels unbelievable to be honest. I've gotten some sleep, but my mind just keeps turning after I woke up. If I'm honest, I was pushing him and I did slap him when he wouldn't talk to me. I'm not proud and I know it wasn't okay, but the helpline I called said there's a difference between what we each done. So does my sister. I suppose to receive any advice I'll need to give you a bit of information about our situation. I'm almost 22, a uni student, and we live together with our 2 dogs. I left and came to my sister's after calling a domestic abuse helpline and reaching out to a friend to see if I could stay but wasn't able to. I didn't feel comfortable finding accommodation with the council for the night. He hasn't reached out. When I did go back after leaving for about an hour because I was trying to find somewhere to stay, he didn't cave from his stance on it was my fault and I made him because I wanted a reaction and I got one. I don't currently work but receive a bursary. He does, but when it comes to our financial responsibilities, personal and shared, we pay out the same amount each month, give or take, except he pays an extra £100 towards rent. Sometimes I have to borrow money from him to cover petrol or I can't buy shopping one week. Not so much anymore, but I've had to lend him money before too. It's been a pretty amicable relationship regarding finances for the past few months. I've been thinking about what I'm going to do. Obviously, I can't afford our house by myself until I get a job, and even then I probably couldn't. I've reached out to the same friend and proposed her moving in or us finding some place cheaper, as I really don't want to live with my sister and her boyfriend. It's a little bit I don't want to give up my independence. The rest is there is no one that can take in my dogs, even him. My sister has cats and so does his family. Fun fact, I'm allergic. My sister brought up sending them to live with our parents abroad even for a while, but one is 15 and tiny and the other, well, she's a border collie and she needs more than that. I suppose that's worst case scenario, but I'd so much rather avoid it. I think what I've been considering might be really stupid. I want my own bed, my own kitchen and my dogs. I have uni work I need to do, and it's only 20 minutes from my campus instead of 1 hour plus. I've been thinking about going back, but we keep our distance. When he's home from work I can stay upstairs or in the living room. We'll sleep separately, he can take the couch, until we can work out both of our finances and living arrangements. Is that stupid? Probably, but to me, it sounds like the best way to keep from him messing up everything right now and making life a huge mess. Seems like, although probably one of the hardest things I would ever do, will keep things easier in other aspects of my life, aka uni, taking care of the dogs. He's not a violent person, usually. When he gets mad though, he turns really mean and you just can't argue with him, it's like a blank wall. I don't really plan on arguing with him. To be honest, I don't plan on talking to him really at all if I did go back, but we kept separate, except to sort out details. Wife of 17 years has basically ghosted us for the last 3 days. Pretty lost with my current situation, looking for any sort of insight. Wife, 39, and I, 40, have been married for 17 years as mentioned. We have 3 daughters, 15, 13, 11. We're high school sweethearts, been together for about 23 years now. I know almost nothing, but here's the only information I have. Wife comes home 3 days ago from work, had to work on the 4th, frantic, emotional, hastily packed an overnight bag and left. Only know this because our oldest daughter was home at the time and watched her. Tried talking to her but she was just crying, distraught, and didn't speak. Said she was almost in a panic. She's not responding to any of our texts/calls. Contacted her parents right away and they eventually responded saying that my wife is safe with them, and to please be patient and understanding. That's it. I tried contacting her sister, her brother, and one of her close work friends. Her brother said he knew nothing and her work friend said she was at work in the morning then gone by lunch, 3 days ago. That's all she knew. That's it. 3 days now, no contact from my wife, not even with the kids, nothing. No one is telling us anything. And here I am with my 3 girls trying to manage without her. Kids keep asking me what's going on, asking what happened with mom, and all I can say is that she's at grandma and grandpa's. And we're supposed to be patient and understanding. I have an overwhelming urge to just pack up the kids quick and drive over there without warning. It's only 3 hours away and sitting here in limbo is awful. The kids think we had a huge fight and are divorcing, but that's farthest from the truth. We never fight, the kids know this. I don't know what's going on, but can someone provide some clarity from a logical perspective? As my current emotional state has me thinking in circles while I try to manage everything without her. If someone passed away, wouldn't your spouse/family be the first person you'd tell? Maybe some past trauma was brought to life? But again, if it were me, my wife would be the first person I'd come to for support. We know nothing. Nothing makes sense, I don't know what to do. And I just sit here in limbo with the girls, we all know nothing, and no one is telling us anything. And it has me worried, scared, angry, etc. Just about any emotion one can feel in this situation. Can anyone come up with something reasonable? Why would you ghost your family like this? Am I the soul for saying I don't want to eat body parts? I have been with my boyfriend for over 3 years now. His parents and I had our issues in the beginning of our relationship, but after about 2 years, they seemed to finally accept me, and although I won't forget certain things they've said about or towards me in the past, I felt like things were getting better. 5 months ago, I decided to go vegan. My boyfriend has been very supportive of my decision to the point where he's incorporated lots of vegan foods into his diet too. When we visit his parents, his mom tends to prepare something for us to eat, which I've thanked her for multiple times. I've never commented on their food preferences or brought up a discussion on being vegan because I haven't felt the need to, and honestly I'm just glad we're able to get along. A couple of weeks ago, my boyfriend turned 24 and we had a birthday brunch at his parents' house, with his sister and brother-in-law. My boyfriend was the one who provided the food while he, his mom, and I prepared it together. He wanted to include vegan options as well, not just for me but also so his family could give it a try if they wanted to. My boyfriend ended up placing regular bacon and vegan bacon on the table, which led his stepdad to vocalize something along the lines of how stupid the concept of vegan bacon is and asked who would need an option like that. I didn't think much of it and responded to him, in the nicest way possible, that vegan bacon was a great alternative if you like the taste of bacon but don't like eating body parts. He then furiously began complaining that he's never heard anything stupider than meat being labeled as body parts and going on about how ridiculous that is. When we finally began eating, I asked my boyfriend's brother-in-law for the egg salad, which was one of the vegan options as it didn't contain any real eggs. So in turn his stepdad asks me if I'm now going to eat dead baby animals. I respond that technically there's no baby unless the egg was fertilized, but that it wasn't real eggs anyway. This is when his mom steps in and says everyone should just eat their own food and leave others alone. A few days after this, my boyfriend's parents brought up the issue with him. His stepdad says he's not happy with how things went and that I was being disrespectful to him by referring to meat as body parts. Honestly, I think this entire thing is ridiculous. I'll admit I could have just ignored him, but I don't really see the point in silently sitting there while his stepdad disrespectfully talks down on my food preferences. My boyfriend wants me to fix the situation, which I'd be willing to do for his sake, but I don't think I'm the one who needs to apologize. I also don't want his parents to think everything's fine or that I'm the one in the wrong because I apologized. But maybe there's different opinions on this. So, am I this whole?